December 16th, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Before dawn, the forest was black and silent. The kind of silence that comes before the sky breaks open with artillery. Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, clinging to the branches of fir trees and the steel hulls of tanks lined up along a narrow road. The engines were off, muffled under canvas. Breath steamed from the mouths of soldiers crouched in the dark, their fingers trembling over rifle bolts. Oberst Joachim Peiper stood at the head of his column, tall, broad-shouldered, his face carved in ice beneath the brim of his SS officer's cap. The leather of his gloves creaked as he lit a cigarette, the tiny flame briefly illuminating the iron cross at his throat. Before him stretched the spearhead of the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, more than 5,000 men and hundreds of armored vehicles. Behind them, hidden by the trees, purred the engines of King Tigers, the most powerful tanks in the world. Peiper exhaled smoke into the freezing air and checked his watch. 5:29 a.m. At 5:30, the world erupted. The opening barrage of Operation WWII, the German counterattack through the Ardennes, known to history as the Battle of the Bulge. The ground shook as thousands of guns opened up at once. The horizon flashed red and orange. Trees snapped like matchsticks. Then, through the fog and fire, the panzers began to move. Peiper's orders were simple: punch through the American lines, cross the Maas River, and drive straight to Antwerp. A bold, impossible strike meant to split the Allied forces in two and buy Germany time. But behind the cold precision of those orders lay a deadly truth. His column didn't have enough fuel to get there. Still, Peiper didn't hesitate. He believed in speed, surprise, and momentum. The road west wound through villages, frozen streams, and forests so dense they swallowed sound. His men moved like a steel snake through the snow, crushing branches and abandoned helmets under treads. By mid-morning, they'd broken through the thin American outposts. The GIs were stunned, retreating under the roar of panzer engines and the hiss of machine gun fire. Peiper's advance was relentless. At Bullingen, his men overran a U.S. supply convoy, dozens of trucks filled with ammunition, rations, and fuel. The perfect prize. American prisoners were rounded up, trembling in the snow as the German commander stepped among them. Peiper studied the captured vehicles, fuel drums stacked neatly, engines still warm, tires sunk in ice. He grinned. "This," he said to his aide, "is how we reach Antwerp." The men cheered. The fuel was captured without a shot fired. For a moment, it seemed as if fate itself was on Germany's side. But in the distance, beyond the forest and fog, a single American soldier watched through binoculars as the black cross of the German column snaked down the road. He reached for his radio and whispered, "They're coming." He didn't know it yet, and neither did Peiper, but the fuel they captured would soon become the very thing that stopped them. Because inside those American trucks, painted with stars and frozen under snow, was a wrong kind of fuel. And every mile the Germans drove deeper into Belgium was a mile farther from salvation. December 17th, 1944, Bullingen, Belgium. The village was a wreck of shattered windows and frozen mud. Smoke curled from the wrecks of jeeps and half-tracks as German soldiers combed through the debris, their breath visible in the morning cold. Somewhere down the road, wounded Americans moaned for help that would never come. Oberst Joachim Peiper stood beside a captured U.S. fuel truck, its engine ticking in the cold. A German mechanic twisted open a cap and sniffed the liquid inside before frowning. "Benzin?" Peiper asked. The mechanic hesitated. "Nein, Herr Oberst. Diesel." Peiper's expression hardened. American trucks ran on gasoline. German Panthers and King Tigers needed high-grade diesel. 50,000 gallons, useless. The news spread quickly down the column. Soldiers stopped cheering. Mechanics cursed, boots crunching through ice as they tested one drum after another. All the same, wrong fuel. For the first time since dawn, Peiper felt the gnaw of doubt. Still, he ordered the advance to continue. "We'll find more," he said sharply, waving his men forward. "Keep moving." Momentum was everything. If they stopped, the Allies would regroup, and the window of surprise would close. By noon, his armored spearhead had pushed west toward Stavelot, its engines devouring the last of their reserves. The roads were narrow, slick, and jammed with vehicles. Trucks slid into ditches. Half-tracks bogged down in snow. Inside one Panther, the crew's breath turned to frost as the tank idled on fumes. The driver looked at his gauge, tapped it, and swore. "Out again," he muttered. They were now 30 miles inside enemy lines, and running dry. Peiper's officers gathered in a ruined farmhouse as wind howled through shattered windows. A map was spread across the table, weighed down by a helmet and a cold lantern. "We can't turn back," said Hauptsturmführer Gustav Nittel. "The roads behind us are clogged. Blown bridges, burned vehicles." "And the Americans?" Peiper asked. "Regrouping. Fast." Through the open doorway, the rumble of distant artillery rolled through the forest. Peiper stared at the map, tracing the route towards Stoumont with his gloved finger. "Then we take what we need. Every truck, every depot, every drop of fuel." He looked up, his blue eyes hard. "If we run out, we fight on foot." Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall again. Hours later, Peiper's lead tanks entered Stavelot, a small Belgian town straddling the Amblève River. American engineers had blown part of the bridge, but not enough to stop them. Under fire from the opposite bank, German pioneers scrambled to repair it. Machine guns chattered, bullets ricocheting off cobblestones. Civilians huddled in basements as mortars shattered rooftops. By dusk, the SS had taken the town, but at a cost. Fuel trucks burned in the streets, black smoke rising against the orange glow of the setting sun. Whatever gasoline the Americans had stored here was destroyed in the fight. Peiper's men were exhausted, their tanks idling on fumes. The cold bit through their greatcoats. Snow mixed with ash underfoot. An officer approached, helmet askew. "Herr Oberst, the last tanker is dry. We can't go any farther tonight." Peiper didn't respond at first. He just stayed down the road, where the headlights of stalled vehicles flickered dimly through the snow. His advance, the sharp edge of Germany's final offensive, had slowed to a crawl. The men gathered around field fires, their faces gaunt and hollow. Some cursed the fuel, others cursed Peiper himself. In the distance, artillery flashes lit the clouds, American guns finding their range. Peiper looked back toward the east, toward Germany. He knew what waited there: no reserves, no replacement fuel, no second wave. This was it. If the Americans encircled them before morning, his entire battle group, 5,000 men, 117 tanks and vehicles, would be trapped in enemy territory with nothing left to burn but their own hope. The next morning, a German radio operator picked up a chilling broadcast from Allied headquarters. "Enemy armored spearhead identified. Advancing west from Stavelot. Cut them off. Starve them out." Peiper crushed his cigarette into the snow and muttered, "They think they can starve us." But as he turned to look at his stalled column, engines dead, tracks frozen, crews shivering inside, he realized the truth. The Americans wouldn't have to starve them. The Panzers were already dying of thirst. December 19th, 1944, near La Glise, Belgium. The snow came heavy and now, thick, wet flakes swirling in the wind like ash from a funeral pyre. The roads were gone, swallowed by drifts and wreckage. Trees leaned over the narrow mountain pass, their branches heavy with ice. Everything was gray. Peiper's armored column crawled forward through the white wilderness, engines coughing, men wrapped in blankets torn from farmhouses. What fuel remained was rationed to the command tanks. Trucks were abandoned along the roadside, their tires half buried in snow. A frozen convoy stretched for miles behind him. Steel beasts turned to statues. Inside the lead tank, the gunner stared through his scope, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Americans ahead," he whispered. Peiper raised his binoculars. Through the falling snow, shapes moved on the ridgeline, silhouettes of Shermans and half-tracks, black against the pale sky. The U.S. Army had sealed the valley. The noose was tightening. Peiper turned to his adjutant. "We hold Largelise," he said. "Whatever happens." The officer hesitated. "Herr Oberst, if we stop here, we won't move again." Peiper's jaw clenched. "Then we'll make them regret coming for us." By nightfall, his men occupied the village, a handful of stone houses clustered around a church. Locals fled into the forests, leaving behind bread, milk, and silence. German soldiers barricaded windows, set up machine guns in doorways, and dragged ammunition boxes into cellars. Outside, the snow muffled everything. Then, the American artillery began. The first shell hit the church steeple, blowing it apart in a flash of fire and splinters. The second struck the road, flipping a half-track into the air. Men screamed as shrapnel tore through the walls. Peiper shouted orders through the chaos. "Counterfire! Return fire!" His voice carried over the thunder of guns and the hiss of burning fuel. The night turned to smoke and flame. Inside one of the houses, a medic worked by lantern light, his hands red to the wrists as he tried to bandage a soldier's leg. "We're out of morphine," he muttered, eyes hollow. "Out of everything." At dawn, the world was white again, silent except for the wind whistling through broken windows. Snow covered the bodies in the street. Peiper walked among them, boots crunching on ice and debris. His once proud column now looked like a graveyard. Tanks with empty fuel lines, frozen corpses slumped beside stalled engines, wrecked trucks filled with snow. An SS driver approached, shivering violently. "Herr Oberst, we can't move the Panthers. The fuel is gone." Peiper looked toward the horizon, the smoke rising from Stewmont, where American armor now blocked the road east. Behind him, the low rumble of engines grew louder. Not German. American Shermans were closing in. He turned back toward his officers. "We'll fight until nightfall," he said. "Then we break out on foot." Later that day, the Americans attacked from three sides. Mortars crashed through the roofs. Snow burst into black mud as shells hit the frozen ground. Machine gun fire stitched across the square. German soldiers fired until their barrels steamed in the cold. One Panther, out of fuel, was turned into a stationary gun, its turret locked, its crew firing until they were killed inside. A soldier shouted from the doorway of a barn, "They are flanking us." Peiper ducked behind a wall, pistol in hand, the air thick with dust and splinters. He could hear American voices now, close, shouting orders through the smoke. "Hold your fire," he hissed to his men. "Let them come closer." But the truth was undeniable. There was nowhere left to go. That night, under cover of snow and darkness, Peiper ordered the impossible. "Destroy the vehicles," he said. "All of them." One by one, his men poured grenades into the fuel tanks of their own tanks and half-tracks. The explosions were muffled by the snow, flashes of light against the frozen fields. The fire burned blue and orange, reflecting in Peiper's eyes as he watched the machines vanish. The engines that had carried them into Belgium, the same steel monsters that could no longer move an inch. He said quietly, almost to himself, "Without fuel, The war is already lost. By dawn, what had once been the spearhead of Hitler's counteroffensive was gone, a blackened scar across the white Ardennes. And Peiper, the man who had captured 50,000 gallons of American fuel, led his surviving men into the woods on foot. Behind them, their tanks stood silent, frozen, dead. December 24th, 1944, the Ardennes forest. The sun never truly rose that morning. It only lightened the sky to a dull gray, as if the world itself had grown tired of color. The forest was silent except for the crunch of boots in snow and the faint clatter of rifles slung over shoulders. Joachim Peiper led what was left of his Kampfgruppe, a line of gaunt, frostbitten men trudging between the black trunks of pines. Their faces were gray, lips cracked, uniforms stiff with frozen sweat. The SS runes on their collars were barely visible beneath grime and frost. They had no tanks, no vehicles, no radio, only rifles, hunger, and the constant sound of distant artillery echoing through the hills. Somewhere behind them, La Glees still smoldered, their panzers burning in the ruins. Peiper stopped for a moment, listening. A few stragglers stumbled up behind him, clutching at their coats. He looked back toward the direction of Stoumont, where the last American shells had fallen 2 days earlier. He could still see it in his mind, the flames curling around the wrecks, the air heavy with the smell of gasoline and iron. That was the end of his offensive. Now, he wasn't advancing. He was escaping. The retreat took them through villages barely marked on the maps, burned farms, abandoned houses, orchards heavy with snow instead of fruit. In one ruined barn, Peiper's men found an old milk cart. They filled it with wounded comrades and dragged it by hand through the slush. Somewhere near Troyspont, a young soldier collapsed in the snow. He was 21, a machine gunner from Hamburg. His friend bent over him, trying to lift him up. "It's done," Peiper said flatly. "Leave him." The soldier turned, eyes wide. "Herr Oberst, he'll freeze." Peiper stared at the dying man for a long moment, his breath rising in white clouds. Then he gave the only mercy he had left. "Then shoot him. Don't let the Americans find him." The shot cracked like a branch snapping under ice. No one said a word. For 3 days, they moved only at night, sleeping in barns or holes dug under fallen trees. Their boots froze to their socks. Their hands cracked from frostbite. When they came across a frozen stream, they broke the ice with rifle butts and drank from the hole like animals. Food was gone. They chewed pine needles to keep from feeling hunger. The snow fell heavier with each day, blanketing the forest and erasing their tracks and their sense of direction. The Ardennes had become a maze of silence and death. Now and then, they heard engines, American patrols combing the woods. Each time, Peiper ordered his men to scatter and hide. They would press themselves into snowbanks, holding their breath as the sound of jeeps and voices passed by. One night, they came across a road littered with destroyed German vehicles, hulks abandoned weeks earlier. Peiper recognized one of them instantly, a Panther from his own command. Its crew still lay inside, frozen where they'd died. He climbed onto the tank's hull, brushing the snow away from the iron crust painted on the turret. He ran a gloved hand over the armor, cold and lifeless. It had once been the symbol of power, of speed, of invincibility. Now it was just a tomb. By the 4th night, the men were barely walking. Some wandered off the trail, hallucinating from exhaustion. The snow reflected the moonlight like glass, making it hard to tell earth from air. Then, around midnight, a scout returned from ahead. "Herr Oberst," he whispered, "we found a farmhouse. Lights inside. Civilians, maybe." Peiper nodded. "Show me." The house was small, a stone cottage on the edge of the woods. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney. Through the window, They saw a family huddled around a fire. Peiper hesitated, then knocked. An old man opened the door, fear etched deep into his face. Peiper spoke quietly, in broken French. "We need food. Just bread. Nothing more." The man said nothing, only looked past him at the line of soldiers in the snow. Finally, he nodded. He brought them what he could: a loaf, a jug of milk, a blanket. Peiper took them without a word and left a single gold ring on the table. It was the last act of civility he could afford. By Christmas morning, they had crossed the Amblève River on foot. The bridge at Stavelot was gone, so they waded through waist-deep, freezing water. The current tore at them, ice forming on their coats as they climbed the opposite bank. Half the men never made it across. When the survivors finally reached the German lines, they were unrecognizable, skeletal, frostbitten, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Peiper staggered into a dugout, his uniform soaked, his pistol still in its holster. The officer who greeted him, a major from another panzer unit, stared in disbelief. "You made it out?" he asked quietly. Peiper gave a bitter smile. "What's left of us?" The major nodded toward the smoke rising behind the hills. "And your tanks?" Peiper looked at him, eyes empty. "They are still in Belgium."